Now, Police and Prison Civil Rights Union says they're shocked about revelations of Facebook rapist and murderer Thabo Besta's escape. A DNA analysis confirmed that the body found in his cell at Mangaung prison in May last year was actually not that of Besta. Let's continue this conversation. Bring in now Richard Mamabulo, who speaks for Popcru. He joins us via our video link this afternoon. It's lovely to have you on the program, sir. Thanks as always for making time. In the statement that you've released, you say that you're shocked about the revelations and you describe the escape as being audacious. What we've also learned through media reports today is that they may very well have been very prominent officials at the prison who are involved or at least who aided that escape. I'm sure you're not shocked by that, are you?
Look, it's quite worrying. I think circumstances leading towards this escape are quite worrying. What we have since established as a union is that, since the incident took place last year in May, what has since happened is that there was an internal investigation wherein a senior supervisor was dismissed and three other members of the correctional center were currently under suspension. And of course, they were just charged for negligence as opposed to these circumstances that we're learning about now. And then therefore the matter was closed. It's only now that there are media reports that the investigation is reopened and we're getting to learn of the fact that there was a body which had been placed in the very same cell that Mr. Besta was supposed to be in. And of course, the details around it that are quite shocking. Yeah. So we believe that it could not have been possible that this act was well orchestrated by junior members. Clearly, there should have been some senior members who would have known. And again, under any circumstances, on a daily basis, in a correctional center, whenever there is a missing person, it would be noted. And in that case, that report was not there. It therefore means that the body would have been taken from outside of the prison into the cell so that the numbers remain the same. So that is quite worrying. It's something which would have definitely been orchestrated at a higher level.
And because so much time has passed, you can't really blame people for going into overdrive around the conjecture and speculation. I mean, even you're saying that if there was a body there and it wasn't that of Besta's, you can't see any other way outside of the body being brought in from outside. That security supervisor that you speak of that was dismissed after an internal investigation, my understanding is that this person was dismissed for negligence surrounding the fire, but not necessarily for any kind of escape. Is that right?
Exactly that's the point, you see. So it then therefore means that there should definitely be further investigations around how the body actually got into the correctional facility and as well as how Mr. Besta would have then escaped. So he must have been assisted. There's no way in which for such a high risk facility there could have been such an escape. Remember that this is a private prison and of course it's run by G4S. It's a foreign owned as well. So the reason why the SAPS would have delegated their duties to this facility would have obviously been because of its safety standards. So we think that this is something that needs to be looked into. But as well, the Department of Correctional Services needs to take account because under the Correctional Services Act 111 of 2018, it is quite clear that whenever there is a partnership of these PPPs that are currently continuing within the two prisons, it's the role of the DCS to ensure that they've got monitoring processes in ensuring that these private companies do oblige by the rules. And in this instance, it would then therefore have meant that the department only relied on information which they could not verify. So that is why, as Popcru, we've been calling that there should be an end to contracting private prisons to look after inmates because, again, the role of rehabilitating inmates is the constitutional duty of the Department of Correctional Services with its core mandate being to rehabilitate. Now, private companies are mainly focused on profit making and we know that the contract is lasting for about 25 years, which is ending in 2026 and that therefore means that on a yearly basis the department spends around R1 billion for the two prisons which house around just less than 6,000 inmates. So that is quite worrying. We think that the funds could have obviously been used to improve the current correctional centers that we have in the country.
All right, I hear you. But are you insinuating that if this prison wasn't run partially by a private company, this escape wouldn't have happened?
The delegation of duties there because it's quite quite clear that the Department of Correctional Services has not been doing its monitoring process. But as well, you would remember that there have been many other reports of abuses within this correctional centers, this private prisons over the years, because like I'm saying, that their commandate is not to rehabilitate but to generate profit. So they do not take consideration human rights.
That's interesting. I mean, it sounds to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's room for G4S here to be scapegoated. I mean, because the other reality, of course, is that this is not unique. We hear all the time about people escaping. Perhaps what makes this more headline grabbing is just the spectacular details around how it happened.
Look, we don't want to make G4S the scapegoat. We think that both the G4S management and the Department of Correctional Services should be held accountable, because they both have a role to play. And of course, the role of the G4S would be to ensure that those who are inmates within the cells are kept there. And of course, other processes that they would have to engage in would definitely need to be engaged with the Department of Correctional Services. So from both sides, I think they are equally to blame for what has happened, and it's something that definitely needs to be corrected. It's an eye-opener, actually, because I think for quite the longest time we've been hearing a lot of complaints, and yet nothing has been done. But it is clearly impossible that a body could have found its way into a cell, and of course that would then mean that there was some level of interference, especially with regards to, or rather from some senior officials from the prison in Mangaung.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, of course, what has happened here is that the incident itself has raised all kinds of questions that put into jeopardy the standing of the justice system in this country, and by extension, the standing of prison officials and prisons themselves. How worried are you that, you know, the kind of continuous dent this has on the image of these prisons may affect even some of your members? Because as we stand, because we don't know so much, everybody is essentially a suspect.
Most definitely. I think also moving from the fact that we had investigations into the Bosasa saga, and we're just still recovering from that, it then says a lot about the kind of correctional centers we do have. I think one of the things that we've always been raising as well was that there has been a decline in the staff complement of the DCS over the years, and of course with an increasing prison population. So it then becomes a difficult task for our members to actually ensure that the core mandate of the department is realized, which is rehabilitation. And for that, of course, we have been engaging with the ministry, and of course, I think with the new National Correctional Services Commissioner, there has been engagements, and we are actually looking towards ensuring that we do improve conditions within correctional centers. But as things stand at the moment, it is quite true that they are filled with a lot of challenges, including the infrastructural integrity, of course, and the fact that you've got an increasing population on a regular basis.
You know, if the Sunday Times article this morning or today is anything to go by, we know there's a lot of money involved in this particular crime. In fact, the ground-up journalist who spoke earlier on to Newzroom Afrika also spoke about how Thabo Bester must have been an incredibly well-connected individual in order to pull this off. Again, we're going to take some time, I suppose, asking questions about how susceptible prison officials are to this kind of bribery at this scale, because, as you've mentioned, it's hard to believe, it's probably impossible that Thabo Bester would have pulled this off without very powerful people being involved.
Most definitely. I think as much as there might be individuals who have got such resources wherein they can actually escape justice, we also think that from the government side, especially the Department of Correctional Services, they also need to look into the manner in which the kinds of relations they have with these private companies actually goes by, because part of the challenge is that there are also a lot of resources that are actually being channeled towards this, as opposed to ensuring that they build on the kind of infrastructure that they do have currently. So it's quite shocking that you would have such incidents. But again, we definitely convinced that this was not a one-man job. Clearly, there had to be have been other people who are involved, and that is where we think the Center of Investigations should focus at the moment.
Richard Mababolo, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. He's a spokesperson for the Police and Prison Civil Rights Union. Once again, appreciate your time on Newzroom Afrika. As the cliche goes, there are more questions than answers.